Hey folks, how's it going? Ever since the full auto was announced, I was a bit skeptical about it. Granblue is a turn-based game where you need to properly time your skill usage in order to overcome boss triggers and special attacks, or to simply maximize your damage, so an auto mode that just spams everything when it's off a cooldown looked a bit out of place to me. The way it's been implemented is also a bit strange. The characters use their skills from left to right and in order of buff skills, debuff skills and attack skills, which is actually alright in most cases. But they won't use healing skills, which is a bit weird and it can't be a timing thing since Phalanx, Dispel and Delay, which are all just as important and require certain parameters to be used effectively, are instead being spammed off of cooldown. I think it has to do with either Cygames not wanting to give players too much sustain or allow them to use auto on harder fights, or with enemy grids and preventing sages from spamming heals. Still, kind of a weird choice. Another weird choice is to not let characters use their field effect skills. They're just buffs after all. I guess it's so not to interfere with other players during raids, but if people wanted to use those to troll, they could do so manually, so I don't really see the point. The restriction on skill that requires a selection is understandable, at least when it comes to Runeslayer and Tormentor. Single target buffing skills could default to MC or the first character in the list, but I guess since this feature has just been added, it's going to see a bit of work to be improved in the future. Lastly, the skills that were not available when it was their turn are just skills with specific requirements like consuming health or charge bar, and of course, with said requirement not met, the skill is not going to be cast. Siete, for example, tries to cast his third skill each turn but fails to do so. At least this time there's no pop-up that needs to be pressed. Another thing to note is that the skill check rotation doesn't actually go back and check if a skill that wasn't available before has become available after the skills have been cast. Here, for example, the Kango MC can't cast No More Doubt because he would need a 10% more charge bar, so it moves on to casting Splitting Spirit instead. After that though, even if No More Doubt can now be used, it moves on to debuffs and then attacks. So what is full auto for? For short fights, 20 million HP or below, I usually want to try and deal with them as fast as possible with the minimum amount of button pressing required, and while full auto can save me some clicks, it's going to cast a lot of skills I won't really need and waste time doing so. On the other hand, most longer fights, tier 2 summon raids, Magneto raids, tier 1 high level raids, tier 3 summon raids, prob difficulty fights and Guild Wars Nightmare 95-100 are usually going to require your attention so your team doesn't get blown up. And while I have to admit it's great for making sure you always have your buffs up, as soon as you need Phalanx, Dispel or Delay, you can't count on it, and if you get distracted, your skill is going to be wasted and you will find it on cooldown when you need it. So the full auto seems to be best used on middle of the road fights that you can't one-shot, but you can still clear easily, like the tier 1 summon raids, Xeno raids, Rest of the Beast raids, co-op fights, as well as Nightmare 90s and maybe some 95s during Guild Wars. The full auto function also has some problems when it comes to certain skills, like skills with a secondary effect, toggleable ones, or buffs that override others, as well as anything that requires a specific timing or setup. For example, Magisa is going to cast Morax on turn 1, but burning on turn 2 for damage. In the same way, Societe is going to begin dancing on turn 1, but end the dance on turn 2, while Water Ewell is going to cast all her 3 skills, overriding her own Fox Flame debuff and lowering its uptime. Both Sturm and Drang have a mode switch skill that is going to be cast every single time it becomes available, and while it's not that bad for Sturm to start with a stackable defense down debuff, Drang doesn't really need that defense self buff. In the same way, the Glorybringer skill Cool Milos is also going to be activated on the first turn and immediately turned off on the second. Other skills that are best used manually are of course going to be Overdrive and Break Assassination skills, as well as skills that require specific situation or follow-ups like Resource Dual Activation. I've been farming the impossible 100 raids from the event with it, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen the MC just use it with an empty charge bar and waste it. You need to be careful about who you bring, what you bring, and how to place your characters and MC sub-skills in order to make the best use out of this feature. Now, while the first part of the video was mostly negative, the great majority of classes and characters are just fine to run on full auto, especially when you're mostly focusing on attack and you don't have to worry about Phalanx, Dispel or Delay, or you have multiple sources of them and you can afford to use them at random times. The full auto is a great help in maintaining buffs and debuff uptime, especially when it comes to stuff like unpredictable and stackable attack and defense down. And of course, since it won't cast green skills, attack or buffing skills with a heal or regen attached to them are going to be quite valuable for sustain. The full auto is also apparently great for speeding through trials, Extreme Showdowns, the Magnified Special Quest. I swear I thought Refuel was a healing skill. And it speeds up co-op slamming as well by removing a click from it. All in all, it seems that with a little setup, the full auto is going to facilitate the grinding of annoying quests without actually impacting higher level content too much, and that's all it needs to be. Alright then, this is it from me for the moment. Let me know if you're liking this new feature and how you're using it, and I'll see you guys next time. Ciao!